Hey, this is author A.L.McCarroll coming at you from my desk in my room. And today I have a special guest for the intro. I am here with my husband, Seth McCarroll.
Hello, everybody.
And he has been the one that's helped shape these stories because at first these three books were separate, kind of like improv, like homebrew D&D type games. And a lot of it was, from our collective imaginations together.
Yeah, and it's cool to kind of see that kind of more to light now.
Yeah, and it's been great being able to put it into a book format so that we have a way to be able to look back over it, even though it's not super copyright infringing like our original games where we pull, from all the stuff that we enjoyed.
Yeah, whatever my special interest at the time, I would just throw at you.
Yeah, and then like from like games that you grew up playing and things like that, just whatever you were enjoying and whatever we were influenced at the time, we would just kind of mishmash it into our game sets.
Yeah, so it's pretty nice to see a version of our game
Kind of live on.
kind of, yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, okay, so normally I would, in this part of it, explain that these are chapter by chapter reads of my first book of my Into the Void trilogy, The Pawn. And before you listen to this next part, if you haven't listened to any of these before, you might want to go back to my channel and listen from chapter 1 so you don't give yourself any spoilers. And I'm going to do a quick overview of the previous video's chapter 11. In that chapter, we see Guinevere getting to go to the underground church, and she gets to go through there looking for one of the crystals, and then she actually finally gets to be confronted by Avenger, and in his reanimated corpse kind of form. And that is kind of where we're at. This up and coming chapter 12, is going to have a little bit more with that, which Avenger, ooh, scary villain.
Yeah, he's always a fun villain, though.
Yeah, villains are fun, though. I like a good villain, A villain can really change and shape a story in fun ways. All right, and a little bit of a life update on how everything's been going for me, and also, you, because you're here with me now too.
Why, hello there.
We've got the little kitten. We've named her Dust Bunny, and she is just all play all the time, super adorable. And yesterday, when I recorded this chapter, I did it on Instagram Live. So if you're on my Instagram, then you could watch that video. I don't know how long they keep the lives for, but you can see the cute little kitty cat and all of her cute little glory. Anything cool you've been up to?
Well, I guess besides work.
Yeah.
No, I've been playing this game called Vampire Survivors. I've been pretty addicted to it. If you ever get a chance, play it on Steam, Switch, Xbox, stuff like that. Really, really fun game.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's kind of like a new age asteroid kind of thing. What is it like? I'm trying to think of a game that it's similar to.
I don't know if you ever played it, but Binding of Isaac.
Oh yeah.
It's just a top roguelike game. It's strangely addicting. I've been really enjoying it.
Yeah, and it's like it drops XP and your little character can pick it up and it's like shooting the little beams and stuff and it's cute. It looked fun. What I saw of you watching.
Yeah, it's been pretty fun.
I haven't been playing any games, but I've been catching up to a lot of like animated shows like Bob's Burgers and like all the little Family Guy episodes I haven't watched in forever, and just kind of like catching up to all of that. And yeah, not too much else. Book 3 is out of the trilogy. Woo! I got that out yesterday, so I finally can say I am a published author of a trilogy. So that's been very, very cool, and I've been, like hip hip hooraying over here about that. So yeah. Well, I think that's about it. So, well, with that, let's get this thing started. Chapter 12. Guinevere felt the blood drain from her face. Her body was frozen in terror. Her mind was trying to wrap itself around what exactly she was experiencing. How could any of this be real, she thought, before she dared to speak. What do you want?" she managed to stammer out, keeping the beam of her light fixed on the animated corpse. She watched as black particles unnaturally flowed out of the mouths of several bodies within reach of her light. The particles undulated through the air before returning to the withered corpse of the first man that Avenger had possessed. The dark liquid oozed into its mouth, and she could see the withered skin of the dead man becoming plumper, smoother, and lighter. The black hollows of its eyes grew lids covering the deep dark holes. The skin began to bulge with newly developed eyes underneath the flaps of smooth, pale skin. The corpse became a living man before her eyes. Its movements had become more fluid as he stood up. The man's face was sickly pale. He had hair black as night, matching the solid black suit he had become clothed in. Avenger opened his eyelids, revealing eyes blacker than the void of space. She got up and prepared to run from the abomination before her. It let out a soft chuckle. "Guinevere, I am surprised a woman of logic would be so fearful of me. I have been inside you for a while now. I would think that you would be used to me by now." He smiled a wicked grin with his reconstructed mouth. Guinevere didn't know how he could be real, and just as she had the thought, he replied in a calculated rage, "I am real." He took a step toward her and continued to speak. "I now need you to listen closely. I have a deal to offer you." She stood in place, terrified and stunned into silence. "You have done very well at finding my crystals. I need you to offer me your crystals and retrieve the one from that stage." She turned the beam of her light to where he pointed. She could see the large cross on the stage with the small shard embedded into the copper surface. She quickly turned the beam back to Avenger to find he had nearly closed the gap between them. The sudden movement made her gasp as he continued to speak. "If you do this for me, I can grow in power. I would, of course, pass some benefit to you." Avenger smiled in a way that didn't reach his obsidian eyes. "I can help you live longer than any other human." He took another step towards her, slowly closing the gap between them. "Guinevere Matthews, you have so much to offer the world. I've seen aspirations you have in your mind, all the things you could do, but such a limited life. You can feel yourself coming to the halfway point where everything goes downhill. We could change that together if you just let me have the crystals." He reached out his hand towards her. She could see black particles bubbling expectantly in the palm of his pale hand. She could feel heavy pins and needle feelings settling over her mind. "No!" Her voice rang out loud in the dark, and the single word rang out. She could see Avenger visibly flinch. She felt a pulling away from her mind, an evident retreat that left her feeling clearer mentally. It was just as Robert Higgins had said. Avenger couldn't take anything if you told him no with any amount of conviction. She was nervous, but felt a strength of mind she hadn't had in a very long time. Guinevere ran the rest of the way down the large stone stage. She could hear Avenger a distance behind her as he spoke in a calm, rage-filled voice. "You will regret turning down my offer, Guinevere Matthews." She rushed up the slick steps, grabbing onto a railing to keep herself from falling. She took quick, cautious steps across the equally damp stone stage and up to the cross behind the wooden podium. Guinevere could see, reflected on the surface of the crystal, deeply embedded in the metal of the cross, small moving images of many dead bodies rushing the stage. She turned her flashlight on the crowd to see Avenger's reconstructed body dissolve into dark particles that moved across the pews, entering the mouths and noses of the withered corpses. They each began to creak and pop as they moved up slowly from their seated positions and shuffled towards the stage. Guinevere turned back to the cross. She attempted to pull the crystal out of its surface with her free hand, but it wouldn't pull loose. Guinevere quickly decided to use the flashlight to hit it. She could hear the shuffling of animated corpses as they lumbered towards her on the stage. The first strike she made with the flashlight on the cross didn't seem to make any difference. Guinevere tried to move the crystal again with both hands after setting the flashlight near the cross. She could feel the crystal shift from side to side in its setting, but it still wouldn't become loose. Guinevere shined the beam of the flashlight across the darkness of the stage. As she did, she could see the corpse of a woman with long patchy hair and a few long yellowing nails on the fingers that hadn't rotted off. The woman was shuffling up to the bottom of the stairs closest to her. The dead woman's face spread into a wicked smile that showed off a dried jawbone and blackened teeth. Of course, she wanted to keep her light on the woman, and all the others following behind her. Still, she knew she needed to continue trying to retrieve the crystal from the cross. Guinevere turned her light back to the cross, leaving the rest of the room in near total darkness. She struck the cross hard one more time with the end of the heavy flashlight, using all her strength and mentally cursing her small frame. To her astonishment, the deep purple shard flew across the stage, landing further back and stopping at the bottom of a rich plum-colored curtain. It glowed in the darkness, letting her quickly run up to it, flashlight beam swinging from side to side in the dark as she did. Guinevere bent down, quickly scooping the crystal up. She turned the flashlight back to the front of the stage. A few corpses had made their way onto the huge stage, and others had slipped on the stairs. The ones that were on the stage shuffled towards her. Each one had a wicked smile plastered on what was left of their faces. She didn't know how she was going to get past them. She thought for a moment to look for a room behind the curtain. Places like this typically had rooms backstage for people to go in and out of. She looked down at the crystal in her hand. The surface of the shard showed a moving image of a door being knocked down, a crowd of bodies pushed through to where she was hiding. So, that option was out, she thought to herself, trying to quickly come up with a new plan. The only other way left would be to return the way she came. She could use the flashlight as a weapon if she had to. If she could be faster than the slow-moving bodies, she could attempt to rush past them. Guinevere ran up to the front of the stage, staying away from the shuffling bodies and careful not to slip on the moist stone floor. All 4 staircases were filling with corpses trying to get onto the stage. One staircase was obstructed by a fallen stage light. The bodies climbed over it in an unnatural, almost animalistic way. The several dozen corpses on the stage moved closer to her, their arms reaching out, fingers curled like claws. She was running out of time, but she wanted to let as many as she could get onto the stage before doing what she planned to do next. Guinevere would need to jump down off the center of the stage. It was tall, but not unmanageable, she thought, as she assessed the distance. She ran forward, the rest of the way to the edge, and jumped, her feet slipping from under her at the last second. Guinevere felt a sharp pain in her left ankle when she landed in an awkward heap of pure pain. "Damn it!" she yelled into the darkness. She must have broken it. She got up as fast as possible, groaning in pain as she hobbled down an aisle, using the pew benches to help her go as fast as her leg would let her. The bodies followed, and she could hear them giving out hissing chuckles as they shuffled behind her. She could hear them growing closer in the darkness. She had nearly made it halfway up the aisle when something grabbed her by the foot, and she fell down, sending a jolt of pain up her leg that sent her crashing down to the ground. She shined a flashlight down to her leg. the decayed hand of a child that grasped her ankle, the same child she had seen sleeping in the lap of the woman frozen in eternal worship. The girl's remains opened their mouth and spoke in Avenger's smooth, slow voice. "Last chance, Guinevere Matthews." The girl dug her bony fingertips into the skin of her ankle, making her scream in pain. "You can make this stop. Just give me the crystals." She freed her leg by landing a few heavy kicks at the girl's body, and she used all her remaining strength to pull herself up and hobble away as fast as she could. The bodies were nearly close enough to grab her. Guinevere reached the metal doors, pushing one open. She threw herself outside as fast as possible and closed the door. Guinevere expected them to follow. She expected to hear their withered hands scraping on the metal door. Instead, she was surrounded by silence. She stared at the door, breathing heavily. Her heart pounded loudly in the sudden quiet. Guinevere put her hand up to the cold metal bar. She thought about looking into the room, but thought better of it, and began the long walk back to the front door. The entire way was an uphill walk in more ways than one. Every step caused her leg to burn painfully as she limped. Guinevere didn't dare stop to treat it, because she could tell that if she stopped, she might be unable to get back up. She was running on adrenaline alone. She needed to get out of here as soon as she could. It took her ages to make the painful uphill walk through the dark, musty hallway compared to when she had first entered. Guinevere kept looking behind herself, ensuring that there weren't bodies moving in the shadows. Several times her own shadow shocked her into palpitations, and through the panic she noticed her eyes welling with tears. Once she reached the front opening, she hobbled out onto the warm sand. Guinevere struggled to use her calm with shaking hands. She called for help before letting herself collapse to the ground with the pain of her ankle and the weight of her biggest mistake. Arriving back at Quintech felt strange, as if she hadn't entirely been aware of her surroundings for a long time. Everything she looked at looked clearer, like a film had been lifted away. Guinevere's lower leg was still in a small amount of pain, even after taking painkillers. She had a distal tibia fracture. The leg had been set in a cast bent behind her in a walking crutch. Below her knee was a peg that helped her walk around. She amusingly thought it made her look extra menacing to the new hires. Her office was cluttered in ways she usually wouldn't have stood for. Her papers were all disorganized in her desk drawers. She could see many examples of the hold Avenger had on her mind over the past few years. Guinevere began cleaning up, giving her hands something to do as she thought. The fact that Avenger had been inside her left her feeling violated in ways she had never felt before. She was scared she could be used again, and felt ashamed that she had pushed away her friends and colleagues. Then there was what she had done to Marcus. Guinevere had destroyed his career and pushed him out of the company and off of the world. From what she could find by looking up his name over her comm, he had become a wanted man in the galaxy. Marcus was tied to crimes over each of the other planets in the system. She knew she could not do much for him. He was a fully grown man. He had chosen to go down that path instead of letting himself be detained by the Gaian authorities. I could tell the truth for what I did, her thoughts nagged her. If you do that, you could risk the entire company. Why would you risk your life's work for just one man? Her mind couldn't help but go back to the night that they had kissed and the many times they had worked together. Marcus had made her so happy that night, and she had destroyed him. The guilt was weighing on her mind. Guinevere then imagined going before the media and telling them she had lied to get him fired, and that she had been collecting alien crystals that a parasitic being was obsessed over. Of course they would think you were insane, and you would lose everything you have worked for, she thought in frustration. It was too much to deal with, but she had a plan for what to do. Guinevere locked her office door and called her parents, letting them know everything that was going on for the past few years. and why she had been so distant from them. She cried as she recounted to them what happened in the church and how Avenger had been controlling her mind. She apologized many times, and to her surprise, they treated her as if they had always had, and advised her on what to do next. They told her to be honest with everyone that mattered the most, so she could have a local support system, and to call if she needed to talk. Guinevere ended the call by telling them she loved them, as she wiped away tears with her free hand. Guinevere lifted her wrist and wrote a message to Daisy. She asked her to come by the office as soon as she could. Guinevere sat Daisy down, showing and reading from Robert Higgins' small spiral notebook journals. Guinevere cautiously showed her the 3 crystals, and she finally told Daisy all of the secrets she had held back from her friend over the last few years. Daisy was skeptical of everything she was told. Once Guinevere had finished showing her everything, she became furious, and rightfully so. Guinevere had made her complicit in removing Dr. Silver from his position in the company. Guinevere had also held back dangerous secrets that could have harmed others besides herself. Daisy had only calmed her anger when Guinevere had broken down into tears. At the same time, she had explained and revealed what it had been like to be under the influence of the being named Avenger. When she recounted what happened in the underground church, Daisy stared at her like someone who had just discovered their loved one had something terminal. Guinevere wished she could have the comfort of her parents during this scary time in her life, but that would subject them further to the same dangers that she had to deal with. She just couldn't do that to them after spending so much time trying to keep them safe. She also worried for her friend Daisy, but she knew Daisy was stubborn and wouldn't allow her to push her away, even if it was for her own safety. So, she asked Daisy to stay close and to keep a watchful eye over her. Daisy could tell if she had another change in her personality. Guinevere had foolishly let Avenger in because she didn't want to believe in something that she couldn't see for herself. She knew they didn't have a test that could detect him in her system. She would need to help check herself mentally since she wasn't confident in detecting his presence in her mind. She needed a friend now more than ever. Daisy, I know I'm asking a lot of you already, but can I ask you to do one more thing for me? Daisy's reaction was strange. She typically would have given her a playful hard time, but Daisy just nodded, looking completely drained. I want to see if you can get a message out to Dr. Silver. I need to apologize to him for what I did. Gwen, I think you should be the one to contact him, but I understand why you want me to do it. You're famous, you have this huge company. I'm sure you're worried about what others will think. It really is a lot to take in. If I didn't know you and know how grounded you typically are, I would think you were absolutely crazy. She looked Daisy over with a plea in her brown eyes. Daisy sighed deeply. I'll do it, but I think you shouldn't expect to get anything back from this. Daisy spoke to her as sternly as her parent would when she was a child. I know you don't have much experience with relationship stuff, Gwen, but when someone is emotionally hurt, they usually don't appreciate getting an apology from a messenger and not from the source of their pain. On the other hand, supposedly you really care about Dr. Silver like I believe you do. In that case, you'll eventually have to think about your future with him and what you're willing to do to help him, and what kind of behavior you're willing to accept from him. You do realize he's become somewhat of a criminal. Guinevere took a moment to weigh her company versus her feelings for Marcus. She felt torn, but knew she still needed to apologize for what she had caused. Daisy, I'd still appreciate if you could get a message out to him. I can't rationalize publicly sharing the truth of what I've done yet. I've got a lot I need to do before I can see myself sharing this information with anyone else besides you. And I know what he has done, and I believe he was driven into that lifestyle because of my own actions. Daisy took her words in and thought to herself for a moment before responding. "I'll do what I can for you, Gwen. Just be cautious of him." Guinevere had been going over every little thing in her mind, and she decided what she needed to do next. She was going to try to fight back. She would build a gun powered by the crystals they had collected, just like the one she had imagined making before. This plan was risky because the blueprint for the gun had been put into her mind when Avenger had unchecked influence over her thoughts. But it was the only thing she could think to do. The crystals had power beyond anything that she had seen before. Guinevere was confident that if she created a weapon powered by even one, she could use that against him. She knew that she would be able to destroy Avenger with such a strong weapon. She got to work in her lab, assisted and watched over by Daisy. She was never too far away from her these days. Guinevere took apart several different types of guns. She refitted them with a system that would shoot a beam of magnified light through the crystal. She wanted to test the weapon. Daisy had suggested letting a man named Blust, who worked for the security team, set a room up for them. She remembered the man. He was a younger of the two men that had helped escort Marcus from the building to be detained. Daisy was starting to become close to Blust. She would see him come around to take Daisy out on dates. But Daisy always refused to go out with him during the day, only leaving her side at night. Blust had been amicable and understanding about the situation, even with the lack of information on why Daisy couldn't leave out earlier in the daytime. Blust had put together a room with a few dummies and target sheets lined up along the room's back wall and a barrier set up for her to shoot from. She walked up to the barrier, lifting the heavy gun, assisted by the black strap that crossed over her shoulder, helping her hold its weight. The gun was a standard assault rifle with a long, thin, circular barrel jutting out from the body. The outside was a dark charcoal gray color, covered in scratches. Guinevere had scratched up parts of the outer shell as she built it and hadn't bothered to fix them. The weapon didn't need to look pretty, it just needed to get the job done. "Here goes nothing." She aimed the gun at one of the dummies and squeezed the trigger. The barrel turned red hot, and a bright white light shot out at the end of the muzzle, momentarily blinding her. She let out a quick pained gasp before closing her eyes and letting go of the trigger. Opening her eyes, she saw that the dummy had dissolved into a pile of dust and started to pull back and swirl in the air. The thick metal wall behind it had been cut through, exposing light from outside, drawing out the dust. The barrel of the modified rifle was still red hot, and it had slumped over like a limp noodle. "Ugh, it's broken!" Guinevere fussed at the sight, while carefully removing the gun so she wouldn't burn herself. Daisy shook her head as she watched Guinevere have a fit. "Come on, Gwen, you can't always get what you want. If so, I'd already have a handsome husband and a beautiful child, and I'd be just as famous as you. So, take this as a win. Your first gun cut a hole in the building's metal. That alone is really amazing." Daisy was right. It just needed more work. A much thicker barrel, a way to further concentrate the beam, and a way to cool it down faster. Still, Guinevere had already created a powerful weapon utilizing the crystals. The next step would be to perfect it. Then once it was complete, she would finally correct her mistake. Hey, this is A.L.McCarroll. Thank you so much for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it. Remember to give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, also turn on notifications so you never miss a chapter. Don't forget to follow me on my social media platforms for updates. You can find the links in the description box. Thank you again for watching. Stay tuned and take care.